Richard Gordon Hatcher, affectionately called Dick by family and close friends, was born on July 10, 1933 in Michigan City, Indiana. He was raised by his parents, Carlton and Catherine Hatcher, in a very poor area called the Patch, which was only a block-long street running into Lake Michigan. Wooden shacks lined both sides of what amounted to an unpaved alley. The Hatchers shared one of those houses. As a young boy, a rock-throwing accident would cause him to lose his left eye, and by the age of 14, he would lose his mother to breast cancer. Wanting to make his father proud and fulfill a wish of his now deceased mother, he would earn a sports scholarship in two sports, track and field and football, from Indiana University. He would work as a dishwasher that summer to earn extra money. His goal was to become a doctor, but that would soon change.
Most importantly, I learned that I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy. Science was not where I wanted to be and what I enjoyed. And so I came home that Thanksgiving for a Thanksgiving break, and I told my father, I said, hey, I don't want to be a doctor. I'm going to change my major. I want to major in pre-law. I'm going to be a lawyer. That's what I'm.
Dick was very interested in the civil rights issues unfolding around him. Long before Nick's in Bloomington, Indiana welcomed then Senator Barack Obama in 2008, the campus restaurant Nick's did not allow black students to dine in.
Real good. Thanks. Good to see you guys. Thank you.
So in 1953, Dick and other members of the NAACP chapter would picket in shifts. Within a few months, as profits declined, Nick started allowing the black students to dine in as well. He would graduate with a bachelor's degree in 1956. He would enroll in Valparaiso University's School of Law. In 1958, he and a friend were denied service at Brownie's Griddle restaurant in Michigan City. All they received was a blank stare from the waitress. A daily sit-in was started, and by the next afternoon, 15 Negroes blocked every booth from white customers. The very next day, owner George Brown ended 11 years of racial discrimination at his restaurant. Hatcher would graduate from Valparaiso Law School in 1959. He would pass the bar in September 1959. By 1960, he would take on his first major case, defending a young black teenager who had been accused of brutally beating a white woman in Mississippi. He fled Mississippi and ended up in Gary, and the authorities wanted him extradited. Hatcher would have a hearing with Governor Hanley in Indianapolis to fight the extradition. Attorney Hatcher argued that extradition would be a death sentence for the teen. Governor Hanley granted him a stay. Hatcher would then become president of Miigwethania, which means we are together, or unity. The organization had grown from 6 members to over 60. Their goal was to reform Gary. The NAACP attorneys, including Richard Hatcher in 1962, filed a federal lawsuit to end de facto segregation in Gary schools. They also represented victims of police brutality. In 1963, he was elected to the Gary City Council. Within a year, Hatcher would become City Council President, the first freshman council member ever to do so. He became the prime mover for the passage of the Fair Housing Law. Today, Negroes serve in every fire station in the city as a result of Hatcher's efforts. Around this time, Muhammad Ali married Gary resident Sanjay Ree in Crown Point, Indiana. Hatcher would also help integrate city's 2 major hospitals. Dozier T. Allen would organize a fundraiser as Hatcher set his sights on becoming the next mayor of Gary. His stock would go up in December of 1966 when Vice President Hubert Humphrey invited he and Carl B. Stokes, a Cleveland mayoral hopeful, to discuss the black disenchantment with the Johnson administration over dinner in Washington. Hatcher was offered as much as $100,000 not to run for mayor. Julian Bond, Harry Belafonte, and heavyweight champ Muhammad Ali attended a major campaign rally for Hatcher. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who also campaigned for Hatcher, stated, "Your vote is your voice and power. The Negro has power because they can vote. If you don't vote, you have no voice and no power." Mayor Katz called Hatcher a radical extremist and an advocate of black power. Hatcher responded by saying, "I'm not in that category. I favor pooling resources to improve the conditions of persons of color. I don't believe in separation." On May 2nd, 1967, Hatcher would easily defeat Mayor Katz.
It's been a long, long time coming. It's been a long time coming. But I know change gonna come. A change gonna come. It's been a long, long time coming. It's been a long time coming. But I know change gonna come. A change gonna come.
This has been one of the most significant campaigns in the history of our city. It marks the end of years of corrupt machine control of the city's government. This is indeed a great day for the city of Gary.
Well, I think that, again, if there's anything that I would want to be remembered for, would not be the fact that I am a Negro as such. I would like for it to be known that I was the very best mayor that the city of Gary has ever had, and that I was able to be the kind of mayor who was concerned about the problems of all the people in the city of Gary, no matter where they might live.
Do you anticipate any problems because of this?
No, I don't. I think that most of the people in the city of Gary are good, decent people.
Hatcher may have won the battle, but the war had just begun. First, loyal city Democrats started wearing campaign buttons supporting Joseph B. Rattigan, the Republican nominee. Then the city council voted 7-1 to eliminate the jobs of the mayor's executive secretary and his clerk typist. Democratic chairman and county clerk John Krupa indicated that before he could commit the county organizations to helping Hatcher, he needed to denounce Martin Luther King Jr., Stokely Carmichael, Joan Baez, H. Rap Brown, and Marlon Brando. Hatcher refused. He launched Operation Saturation, a door-to-door effort to register voters for the fall election. With close to 2,000 volunteers and 400 of them being white, Krupa stated that this campaign workers were not good patriots. He called them the new radical element of the civil rights struggle. Meanwhile, it was reported that Democratic organizations offered $20 to anyone that would tear down Hatcher campaign posters. This angered Governor Roger D. Brannigan and Democratic State Chairman Gordon St. Angelo, who demanded that Krupa resign. He refused. He also refused to loan any funds to help with Hatcher's campaign. Hatcher would take a big gamble. He inserted an ad in the New York Times and the Gary Post-Tribune. The headline read, "For God's sake, let's get ourselves together." The 64-line text surrounded a photograph of a white policeman clubbing a black man. The gamble paid off. Within a week, $9,000, and by October, a grand total of $200,000. The National Democratic Club in Washington, D.C. would sponsor a fundraiser for Hatcher. Harry Belafonte, Senator Robert Kennedy, Senator Edward Kennedy, and Vice President Hubert Humphrey would be in attendance. Their event raised another $5,000, and VP Humphrey said that, "I am Vice President of the United States, and I know this young man. I have checked him out carefully. he will be the next mayor of Gary, Indiana. But as the election grew closer, Krupa would order over 5,000 names stricken from the voter registration rolls and added over 3,000 whites who he said were new voters. On the eve of the election, FBI agents uncovered 1,110 fictitious names. On election night, Richard Gordon Hatcher would win the election by a razor-thin margin of 1,389 votes. On January 1st, 1968, he would be sworn in as mayor of Gary, Indiana, the first African-American mayor in a city with over 100,000 people or more. By June of 1968, the country was numb. Presidential hopeful Robert Kennedy had been assassinated. Dr. King had been assassinated a few months earlier. His brother John F. Kennedy was assassinated while he was president of the United States. Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, Emmett Till, and the 4 little black girls killed in Birmingham, Alabama church bombing would have been some of the most tragic events of the decade. The Apollo 8 mission from 1968 seemed to bring about a sense of calm for the entire nation after having lived through all of the tragedies of the decade. Gary native Frank Borman II was the commander of the Apollo 8, the first mission to fly around the moon. December 21st, 1968 through December 27th, 1968. The crew was named Time Magazine's Men of the Year for the 1968 upon their return. Mayor Hatcher would host a parade for Commander Bowman on January 15, 1969. In January 1971, the Jackson 5 would return home to perform in support of Mayor Hatcher's re-election campaign. The mayor was attempting to get the first black city judge elected. In 1971, Hatcher would easily secure a second term, and Frederick Work would become the first black city judge in the city's history. Due to the white flight, an area in Gary would annex and become the town of Maryville.
I am Vernon G. Smith, Indiana State Representative representing the 14th House District. I'm also a professor at Indiana University Northwest, where I'm a full professor with 25 years of service there. Prior to that, I was a principal for 20 years and then a teacher in the Gary Community School Corporation for 7 years. In 1967, we had a historical moment in Gary. Gary elected the first black mayor of a major city. This sent shockwaves throughout Indiana, being a racist state, and across the world, where people were astonished that we were able to elect a African American for a major city. At that time, there was a lot of jubilation, but some people were not receptive to the ideal of Richard Gordon Hatcher being the mayor of the city of Gary. There was one gentleman by the name of Chet Dobus, who was the Indiana State Representative, who lived in the Glen Park section of Gary, who masterminded a plan to take the buffer zone of Gary, which was now the town of Maryville, and to convert it into a town. He introduced the bill to the Indiana legislature. It did pass the initial session. However, there were some friends of Gary who made sure that the bill did not get down to the governor's office, so it was not signed. So Gary had a year reprieve where we could have annexed the buffer zone. Let me just go back a moment and explain what a buffer zone is. Any Class 2 city in the state of Indiana has a 3-mile buffer zone for its growth. Gary was denied its growth area, and it was taken away to create the town of Maryville. So the second year, what Chet Dobus did was he introduced the bill again. And this time, when the bill passed both houses, they had a state trooper to take the bill down to the governor's office for his signature. And so the city of Gary became land-bound. We cannot grow. We did in 1972 or 1973 annex Black Oak because that's only where we could grow. We took in the Black Oak area. You know, we can't go north because the lake is there. We couldn't go any further east because Portage is there. And now we can't go south because the town of Maryville exists. And with us annexing Black Oak, we can't grow any further to the west, so we're land-bound.
Determined to push the Black political agenda forward, Mayor Hatcher organized the first National Black Political Assembly. Many were worried that after the assassination of Chairman Fred Hampton in 1969, that this would spark another stream of murders. Part of their goal was to raise the number of Black politicians elected to office, increase representation, and create an agenda for fundamental change. In February of 1972, the Gary Westside High School basketball team lost the state basketball championship to Connorsville. Bad officiating was blamed. The Cougars fell 80-63 to Connorsville. Westside was whistled for 31 fouls to Connorsville's 9. The Spartans shot 47 free throws to Westside's 12. Violence erupted in the stands as well as in the parking lot. The Black National Convention event would be held on March 10, 1972, in Gary, Indiana at Westside and Roosevelt High Schools. President Nixon's aide, Ron Brown, called the event nonpartisan.
So when we announced that the convention was coming to Gary, the Post-Tribune almost collapsed. Said no, you cannot bring all those Negroes here to the city of Gary. And first of all, where are they going to stay? Where are they going to stay? You got that one hotel, and that's it. I mean, it may have. Thank you. It may have 3 or 4 rooms, 3 or 400 rooms, but we're talking about thousands of people coming from all over the country. Where are they going to stay? And the people of Gary, so unbelievably, the people of Gary said, they can stay in my house. They can stay in my home. We were able to raise some money, and some of the money we used to help to pay for bus tickets, to pay for people so that they could get to Gary, because we wanted everyone to be represented at that meeting. We wanted people from every state, a delegation coming from every state to come to that meeting. And we wanted that meeting to be an open meeting. And so the question arose because at that time, Angela Davis was having her problems. And let me tell you, people did not want to be seen in the same town with Angela Davis, much less in the same building. And so there was quite a discussion back and forth about that. Well, should we invite Angela Davis? And of course, I always, and since I'm the one telling the story, I can say this. So I spoke up again, and I said, it's our meeting. We'll decide who comes, not the newspapers, not somebody outside these meetings. It's our meeting. And so Angela Davis is our sister. She is welcome to come to this meeting. And so sure enough, she came to that meeting.
The July 5th, 1974 issue of Time magazine named Richard Hatcher as one of America's most outstanding young leaders. In 1975, Mayor Hatcher would defeat former ally Dozier T. Allen. In 1976, he would marry Ruth Bowles. In 1977, East Gary would become the city of Lake Station, Indiana. In April of 1978, Mayor Hatcher would turn down a job offer to work at the White House during President Carter's administration. His first child, Reagan Hatcher, will be born that year as well. As the business would continue to flee the city for South Lake Mall, located in Maryville, Sammy Davis Jr. would step forward and help invest in the city. The Holiday Inn would reopen as the Sheraton Hotel in December of 1978. The Genesis Center was supposed to help boost tourism downtown, but construction delays forced the city to begin paying the hotel's utility bills to keep it open for a few more years. In 1979, Mayor Hatcher would easily secure his fourth re-election bid against former campaign manager Bell. The Bud plant, which opened in 1950 and employed 5,000, most of which were citizens of Gary, began to close its Gary location. The city now had just over 40 businesses remaining downtown, and the steel mill's workforce had been also reduced. The Genesis Center would finally open in 1981. By 1982, the Genesis Center would attract preseason NBA. Bobby Knight would have his IU Hoosiers play exhibition games and mini concerts. Prince and The Time would pack the house on November 19, 1982. By 1983, the prophets of doom were frustrated. Business growth for minority companies, which were traditionally shut out. The Village and Tri-City shopping plazas were booming. A retail strip mall on the corner of 9th and Broadway was also getting ready to open. The owner of Donnelly & Geiger, a St. Louis-based pipe and valve distributor, moved his operation from Chesterton to Gary. He explained his move. Gary is in the center of where the action is. Business wants location and traffic. He chose 37th and Grant. As his primary election loomed, Mayor Hatcher would be challenged by another former ally, Councilman Thomas J. Crump Jr. Although he secured a fifth historic term, it was his lowest margin of victory since the 1967 victory over Mayor Katz. His campaign was also accused of voter fraud. There's no question there's some clear indication of voter fraud, said Crump spokesman Thomas Barnes. He said there were reports of Crump poll watchers being locked out of polls for more than an hour, tampering with absentee ballots, and voters registered to non-existent addresses. The Adam Benjamin Jr. Metro Center was built in 1984. It is a multimodal commuter hub operated by the Gary Public Transportation Corporation. The Metro Center would win a state honor for best architecture. Apartment buildings along Fifth Avenue had been renovated, a transition from an eyesore to modernized multifamily dwellings. In 1986, the Hudson Campbell Fitness Center would also open in downtown Gary. Dunn and Bradstreet, better known as the D&B, ranked Gary, Indiana, 8th among the 202 fastest-growing cities. A D&B spokesperson said, Gary is at the brink of an urban renaissance. A rookie named Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls would play an exhibition game versus Wayman Tisdale and the Indiana Pacers. Whitney Houston, New Edition, and many others would perform at the Genesis Center, the largest convention center in Northwest Indiana. There were also talks of a civil rights museum to be built in downtown Gary. On paper, Mayor Hatcher seemed invincible as he pursued a sixth term. But in May of 1987, Gary entered a new era in a rather subdued fashion, when overwhelmingly, Calumet Township Assessor Thomas Barnes was elected as its new mayor, ending the 20-year rule of Richard Hatcher. After a devastating loss, and still 9 months before Mayor Hatcher would officially leave office, he continued with the Civil Rights Hall of Fame Museum push. On August 10, 1987, President Reagan stated, I, Ronald Reagan, President of the United States of America, do hereby proclaim August 12, 1987 as National Civil Rights Day. I call upon the people of the United States to observe this day with appropriate ceremonies and activities. 24 years ago this month, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led a march in Washington, D.C. to demonstrate the need for civil rights legislation. Mayor Hatcher stated that the city of Gary had raised over $1 million before anyone else was asked to contribute. BET would host 4 fundraiser telethons from 1986 to 89. The final one was hosted by Jane Kennedy Overton on September 16, 1989. Civil rights notables and members of Congress, including Congressional Black Caucus Chairman Kwesi Mfume, Democratic National Committee Chairman Ron Brown, Dr. Lenora Fulani, and Reverend Jesse Jackson attended. Black Entertainment Television would broadcast the telethon to more than 15 million homes throughout the United States, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and Alaska. As other administrations came and went, the Civil Rights Museum was not on their agenda. In 2000, Hatcher announced it was time for one last push. Soon after, the Post-Tribune reported that from 1985 through 1990, the Hall's board spent $1 million, $20,000 more than it had actually taken in during the period. Hatcher refused to explain how the money had been spent. His reason? Discrimination. I won't play the game with anyone that wants to single us out but doesn't ask other foundations or nonprofits for the same kind of information, he told the Indianapolis Star. By the summer of 2002, he had received modest pledges from the federal government and the county. The Gary City Council approved $5 million for the project. His museum, for once, looked like it was starting to come together. An invitation-only gala to raise funds for the museum would take place in October of 2002.
The Civil Rights Hall of Fame will be a very educational facility for everyone who comes to enjoy it. It'll have very modern, high-tech ideas involved, and each year we'll induct a new group of people who have contributed to civil rights into the Hall of Fame. And it will be the only facility that's a National Civil Rights Hall of Fame in the nation.
I want to now ask our person who is very unassuming, and in fact some people have even suggested that he is shy and bashful sometimes. He calls himself simply the country preacher. And I always have a hard time getting him to come up and say something in front of people. But hopefully tonight he will agree to come. All of us in Gary and in this area, of course, are very familiar with him, not just because of all that he does all over our country and all over the world, but all that he has done right here on behalf of the people of our community and people of this area. It is a great pleasure to ask my brother, my friend, and certainly one of the most dynamic individuals who ever lived, the Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson.
Good evening. Let me express thanks in a very special way to Mayor Hatcher for this vision, to the presence of my friend Hugh Price and others who are here. This museum idea, this landmark idea, has huge historic meaning. Many of us today who are concerned and anxious about our children, how to relate to us, how to relate to continuity. A fruit without a root is dying. A ship without a rudder is lost. Unless we tell our children this story, then they will be lost, and we would have been irresponsible. That's why when the children of Israel got across the River Jordan, and the river was dried up by an act of God, and they were celebrating, we're across the river. And God told Joshua to take 12 strong men and put 12 stones in the river. And they said, that doesn't make sense. I mean, we'll cross the river now. We are over now. We are free now. Why should we go back to the river? God told Joshua to say to them, so that you know how you got across the river. You know how you got from Mississippi and South Carolina and the like to Gary, and how Gary was once a great industrial center. You know what gave birth to Merrillville. You know. But the Bible says, but your children shall ask you in time to come, what of these stones? And that's why you build a museum. That's why you build a civil rights museum. So when our children ask us, what was it like when Dr. King was alive? Well, Hatchet, that was Montgomery in 55, and that was Birmingham in 63, and that was Selma in 65, and there was Gary in 68. Dr. King campaigned for Richard Hatchett to become mayor of Gary under protest. The prevailing power structures that be black and white were determined because they were locked in their own relationships. And Hatchett was this new phenomenon in American politics. Dr. King did the radio tapes, telephone tapes, to vote for Richard Hatchett. He campaigned for the new mayor, Richard Hatchett. This was the first expression of his work out of Selma North. Hatchett became mayor, and then Carl Stokes became mayor of Cleveland. I say that as Montgomery, and then there's Birmingham, and Selma, and there's Gary. He was not just a mayor, he was a visionary leader, and out of that came the Black Political Conference of 1971. So it's not just Jackson 5 and an expression of Gary's cultural strength or his professional athletes from Gary Roosevelt, but Mayor Hatchett was the pivotal factor in redefining national politics. In that conference in Gary was Coleman Young, late Coleman Young from Detroit, and the late Carl Stokes from Cleveland. All these forces cut their teeth in Gary, Indiana. You know, and I know, when your children ask you, what happened to Gary? Well, in part, the mills closed, but Merrillville was born. If this base were inside where it left from, one of the hottest cities of America would be Gary. A combination of the mills closing and the flight left Gary in the hole of the donut. That's right. Well, our children must know what it was, not because black politicians were incompetent or unable and couldn't manage and couldn't handle stuff. Nothing happened to us. When the base left, and when you trade off gambling boats for steel mills. Come on now. And when the middle class base turns farms into cities, there's nothing much left to manage except heartbreak. But we at least must put down this stone, this museum. So when our children and grandchildren ask us, what of Gary? What happened? Where did the Jackson 5 come from? Where are these professional athletes? Where the big dog and what all that stuff, where it came from Gary? Gary was because we had Richard Daley in Chicago and we had Richard Hatchett and Gary. That was our mayor. He was the pace setter for American urban politics. So tonight it's the fun and joy of being with Bill Cosby because he is such a dedicated, emancipated, not just entertainer. Bill Cosby has a special factor of intelligence and commitment, but Bill Cosby will never disgrace us. That's right. He will never demean Dr. King. You will not find in Bill Cosby, when our enemies vilify Dr. King, our youth should not reduce him to butt of jokes. That's right. Bill has that integrity. We must know how pivotal Gary is to national civil rights history. South Africa and China and Poland saw the corpus in Gary. Gary was the first expression outside of Selma for all the, now from Colin Powell on back down, all the black, there was no black caucus. Y'all hear me? There were no black mayors in Houston and Dallas and San Francisco and Atlanta, and all of that comes after Gary. Say after Gary. After Gary.
After Gary.
And that Congress must be, it is a huge, I would say again, that is Montgomery, that is Birmingham, there's Selma, and there's Gary. And we thank and praise God to run Richard Hatcher. Another big hand for Mayor Richard Hatcher. Thank you very much.
Bill Cosby is coming down. I'm not sure if he's here yet, but he's coming down in just a moment. The state president, Frank Breckenridge, is with us, and I could not mention Frank without mentioning his wife, Cora Breckenridge. Cora is a member of the Board of Trustees of Indiana University.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hatcher, and to Reverend Jackson, and certainly all of you, my brothers and sisters. I am pleased, first of all, let me say, to respond to Reverend Jackson's request for donations for the museum, and on behalf of my wife, Cora Breckenridge, and National Board member of the NAACP and trustee of Indiana University, the first African American to ever be elected to the Board of Trustees of Indiana University in 1997. We want to contribute $500 for the National Museum, and here's the check. About 6 months ago, my wife and I received a phone call from a gentleman whose name is Dr. Robert Franklin. He's a former retired superintendent of the schools in Elkhart, Indiana. He said, I have something I want to share with you and tell you about, and can I meet with you? And we said, yes. So we set up a meeting, and he came to my church office, and he said, I only had this box with him. So we started talking. He said, you know, he said, for several generations now, there's been the skull of Nat Turner in my family. And Cora and I, our mouths dropped open, as you would expect. But he said, I am now, I'm retired, I'm getting older, and my children have said they do not want it. So he opened it up, and sure enough, would you help me?
Oh, this is amazing. Oh my God. Look at the actual skull.
And he opened it up and showed it to us. And then he showed me a letter which he received from his father before his father died in 1968. Now, he is from the Tidewater area of Virginia, right where this, the Nat Turner insurrection took place. And that's where his family generations were born and came up. And his grandfather was a physician. Okay? So the letter, and this is the letter that he received from his father, not very long, in 1968. It says, to whom it concerns, this skull, to the best of my knowledge and belief, is the skull of Nat Turner, the Negro executed, it is said, in the Tidewater area of this state of Virginia. It came into the possession of my father, Dr. Albert Franklin, a practicing physician in Richmond, Virginia, around 1900. It was given to him by his office, in his office by a young woman who inherited it from her father, a physician who was in attendance at the execution.
Mr. Cosby has agreed to come and to just say a few words, so we're going to let him say a few words. That's right. And then, as he puts it, he wants to get to work. So let's give a huge round of applause to Grace, who lives, Mr. Bill Cosby.
Good afternoon. You all should be in your chairs by now. But that's all right. This is a wonderful, wonderful event, and a moment that requires a quote that I love to make nowadays. It's my new mantra. And it came from all places as I was watching a prize fight on home box office. And the fighter, David Reed, was winning until David decided to start doing some other stuff. And that's when the other fighters started to, Mr. Trinidad began to loosen the screws on it, whatever contained something. And David was losing badly. My point is, the manager, if you all open this up just a little bit, the manager said to David, read. Because David is losing badly. Do you understand? I know you all understand losing. Yeah. All right. And he said, David, listen to me. David, it's not what he's doing to you. Mm-hmm. It's what you're not doing.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Does this make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to have one big party tonight, and then it's over, isn't it?
No.
This is going to be, we're going to have one skull. And we'll pass it around to the different stores where you can get some wine and things like that. Is that what it's going to be?
No.
All right, then look, there's many ways to raise money.
Come on, baby.
Isn't it?
Yes.
You go and you buy a lotto ticket. Right. And the man said your chance of winning the lotto ticket, the chance of winning the lotto, you got the same chance of getting hit by a bolt of lightning. He said, well, who wants to get hit by a bolt of lightning? But you got just as much a chance of buying the lotto ticket. But you see that it says win $280 million. And you know you're not going to win. But you buy the ticket. Why? Because it has a dream on it. $240 million has a dream to it. Even if you don't have it, you can have your ticket and lay back and smile. What you going to do to your boss when you win?
Oh, yes.
What you going to say to certain relatives that will loan you money? This thing empowers you until there is a winner. Take your dollars and build something that you can come and see. Your children need to see this. They need to see it instead of hearing it from you, because most of the time when you talk about it, you don't feel so good anyway. So every time they hear about a victory, it's because you're talking about somebody done took something else away from you. You're talking about there's no more good old days, or there never was, whatever there was, and where you ran from. And it's tiring, ladies and gentlemen. We need to finish something. We need to finish it and put it there so that you can come by and look at it. And you say, just like we always do, look, if you didn't get my $2, that building wouldn't be up there. Now listen to me carefully. We started this. The mayor is back there. You've got every leading person, everybody except the people that made barbershop. Yeah. But I'm sure that once you build it, the people that made the movie Barbershop will come and make the movie there. It'll be the first time they'll know what they're talking about. Do you understand me? Yeah. All right, now I'm going to work.
I just grabbed Naomi Millender away from the orchestra section because I'd like for her to give some insight on the Civil Rights Hall of Fame. What do she think? What do you think that the Civil Rights Hall of Fame will benefit our community? Tell us about that. And also I'd like to hear your comments about the reception here tonight.
Bill Cosby, who was just here a few minutes ago before going on stage, he said that we got to stop talking about the good old days and we got to show the kids. And I commend Mayor Hatcher, his committee, his forthrightness, his stick-to-itiveness. He has not given up because he understood more than anything that we've got to show our children. We've got to show them, you know, what this is all about, and we have to just stop talking about it. This Civil Rights Hall of Fame is going to benefit everybody. Right. Everybody in this country. America was built on two principles. One was a backwards principle and one was a progressive principle. And I see that the progressive principle through the Civil Rights Hall of Fame will be instituted and will benefit all of us. I thank the mayor, and I also want to thank the Mayor Hatcher
because it was 20 years ago that he somehow found the funds to help us start our Gary Civic Symphony Orchestra. Yes, he did. We had our first major concert under the late Bessie Tatum's baton. You know, she was an icon in our community. And we were able to use some of those funds to start our musical library. You saw some of us playing tonight. These are people that are very dedicated to this concept. They're multicultural, multiracial, but they're people who have one heart and are very progressive in their orientation, and they work with us. At one time, there were people who didn't think Gary deserved a symphony and said bad things about our city, but we didn't care. We started, and with the help of many, many people, including Mayor Hatcher, we were able to start then, and we now continue with the tradition of bringing beautiful music to a beautiful community.
Mr. Drinkett, can you tell us something about the struggles within the civil rights era, and then tell us why it's so important to have a Civil Rights Hall of Fame?
Let me tell you where that idea come from.
Okay.
Mayor Hatcher and I we were in Atlanta, Georgia, and it was a Dr. King during the Dr. King week.
Yes.
And we was with his wife, Coretta,
Yes.
and he asked her, what happened to that old wagon that pulled his body during the funeral procession?
Yes.
And she said that she didn't know. It had been lost or taken or something. And so on the plane on the way back home, he said, Lou, we got to build a National Civil Rights Hall of Fame. That's how the idea started. Well, and then I've had an opportunity to work in both of Jesse Jackson's presidential campaigns. See, a lot of people don't know Mayor Hatcher is the reason that Jesse ran for president. He encouraged him and became the first chairman of his presidential campaign. He did all of the legal work. He had to go into every state, do all the paperwork. He did all of that. See, a lot of people don't even know what a great man he was.
For this reason is why we need the Civil Rights Hall of Fame, so that we can document our story.
That's right. But you know what I'm really disturbed about now is about Mayor King. I think that he's actually breaking the law.
Now you're speaking upon the council had appropriated $5 million for the Civil Rights Hall of Fame, and King has yet to turn over the $5 million. Am I right?
That's right. They voted in favor of it. He tried to veto it. They overrode his veto. And now then he said he was going to sue. And now he asked for a stay in the courts because he knew he was going to lose that case. So now it's just at a standstill, and now he's talking about he want to appoint some board
To do a feasibility study, from what I understand.
We've already done a feasibility study by one of the most profound companies in America.
Well, we can also see that that's not going to hinder us from building the Civil Rights Hall of Fame. That only gives insight to the community to see exactly who the people that they have elected, what they're doing to us as a community, or how they're treating us as a community. So it's up to each individual to decide for themselves exactly how to decide on their vote, how they would like to vote, or people like that sometimes.
The issue of the construction of a Civil Rights Hall of Fame was a vision of one of my predecessors, Richard Hatcher, all the way back to when he was serving as mayor. And I was approached by the former mayor and others seeking funding to construct the Civil Rights Hall of Fame. Now first, the from the perspective of my office, the project had not been thoroughly put together in terms of the necessary planning and marketing studies to show that it was sustainable. Right about during the same period of time, we had the issue over in South Bend, for example, where they had previously located and constructed a Hall of Fame for college football, right in the shadow of Notre Dame. And that was beginning to show problems. In fact, later it was unable to sustain and is now closed. And that was a concern we had. We had a number of meetings. We made a number of suggestions. We did approve an exclusive right to certain property for the construction of the site, if and when the project was properly prepared and put together. The only issue about litigation had to do with the separation of powers issue. The city council unilaterally did an appropriation. Under the law of Indiana, in a city such as Gary, appropriations, with the exception of police and fire, have to be initiated by the mayor. And on that, and there were several other issues during my tenure where we believe that the council overstepped their authority under the separation of powers as it existed, and we were compelled to vindicate that view in courts. And on the 2 or 3 occasions during my 10 years where we had to take that action, we were successful. And again, it had nothing to do with it being the Civil Rights Hall of Fame. It could have been the stadium. It could have been any structure. The issue was preserving, not just for me as mayor, but those who would follow, the lawful authority of the office, similar to the lawful authority of the legislative body. There are certain things, for example, zoning decisions, that no matter what I, as mayor, may want to do or have zoned, the most we can do is ask the council to do it. And the council on a zoning question is under the law of Indiana, is the ultimate authority on what parts of the city are zoned for what purpose. So it was purely a separation of powers issue that caused the litigation to take place.
But I have to tell you, up to that point, up until 1972, there had never in the history of this country been a meeting, a black political gathering of that size, of those proportions. And the film says 8,000. We were sure there were more than 10,000 people that came to that meeting. So it was the largest black political gathering in the history of the United States. And to be honest with you, there hasn't been one since. There hasn't been one since. So the truth is that it was unique in that regard. Now, in addition to some of the criticisms that were received, because as the film says, all black people in the country did not think this was such a wonderful idea at all. 1972, another very historical event was taking place. Shirley Chisholm was running for president of the United States. We had never had anyone that had the temerity, the audacity to run for president of the United States, and she was a woman. She was a woman, and at that time that was thought, wow, unheard of, unthought of, and yet Shirley Chisholm ran the first serious campaign for president by a black person in the history of this country. She ran that for president, 1972. So everyone, of course, said Shirley has to come to Gary, has to come to the convention. She has to be a part of this. And so Shirley, her campaign staff put out a statement that she would not be at Gary. And frankly, she was not alone. A number of members, black members, at that time we had 10 black members of the U.S. Congress. A number of them said they wouldn't be there either. They were not going to be seen. The head of the NAACP said he wasn't going to be seen on the same stage with Amiri Baraka and some of those other bomb-throwing folks who didn't represent black people anyway. And so Shirley was not coming. She was not coming. I called her the night before the convention, and I tried to urge her to come. I said, Shirley, if you come to this meeting, I said, the people there, thousands of people there, they will applaud you. You're running for president. You're the first one running for president. But she said, oh, Mayor, the people that on my staff tell me that if I go to Gary, if I come to that meeting, that what if I'm rejected by my own people? That will be the end, of my presidential campaign, because she can't even get her own people to support her. And she said it would just be too much of a risk for me to come to that meeting. Now, I talked to Shirley Chisholm after that, sometime after that, and she deeply regretted the fact that she did not come to Gary, because she would have been tremendously, the place would have gone up in smoke if she had walked in. And if you can just think about this, and I'll close with this, but the fact is that slavery, even after we left slavery, there was a short period when we were able to be elected to public offices in the South, up until 1876 approximately, when the compromise took place, and the compromise, in fact, put us back into slavery. And so we did not have representation in governmental bodies. We did not have legislators. We didn't have mayors. And what do elected officials do? They do a lot of things, but one of the things they do, they hand out contracts. They hand out money. They decide who gets the money, who gets the contract. And if you can just think about that, 100 years, we had nobody representing us. That money was going to other folks. It was not coming to us. And so if we look at the 72 convention as representing a beginning of a change in that regard, and our beginning to elect more and more people to public office, what that means is that more and more of us were moving into positions where we could control those contracts, where we could make sure that our community got jobs and got the benefit of those contracts. And so that was a huge change. That was a huge change, not just politically speaking, it was a huge change economically speaking. Now, we are in the process, it seems, of giving it all back. Yep. We don't seem to really realize what we have, and we seem to be in the process of giving it all back. The 1972 convention did represent an historical turn change. I teach out at Indiana University. Every year, I make it a point to put on the final exam, I put this question on the final exam. Where did the National Black Political Convention take place? In what city did the National Black Political Convention take place? And guess how many of the students that I have today get that question wrong?
0.
75. Did someone say 75?
Yes, sir.
So about 75% of them. I mean, and many of them live in Gary. They live in Gary.
75% didn't know. Didn't know.
Pardon me?
75% did not know.
75% did not know that the National Black Political Convention in 1972 took place in Gary.
Oh, Lord.
And let me tell you, at the beginning of the semester, I always say something about that. I said, well, that's history. I said, it's there. And now, just one other quick thing. If you go out to Westside High School, we all know where Westside High School is. And if you walk into that gymnasium, which is the room that you just saw in this film, if you're a student at Westside High School, and you walk all around that gymnasium, go up in the bleachers and down the aisles, and just walk all over there, you will see not a single indication that one of the most historic events in the history of this country and certainly in the history of our people took place in that room.
Lord have mercy.
Nothing. There's nothing there to even say, well, yeah, a few people came together here, 40 years ago, and they had a meeting. And that is one of the things that I blame myself for that. I blame our officials for that. At the very least, they could get just a little plaque, Reverend, and put up there and say, in March of 1972, this is what happened in this room. But we have reached such a point that we don't think it's even important enough to do that. And yet, I see some of our elected officials today, they wouldn't be elected officials today if that meeting had not taken place. They would not hold those offices they have. So at the very least, one of the things we have to learn, Aretha Franklin said it best, but we have to learn to respect ourselves.